Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here today. On behalf of Microsoft and on behalf of the cost management team, I want to welcome you here to Ignite. I hope you're having a wonderful time, and I'm really glad to be here today to talk to you about cost management. Now, before we get started, let me do a quick show of hands. How many of you think that you have a great handle or a good handle on your cost spend? Show of hands. All right, we have one person there. Congrats. And how many of you think it's a challenge? I'm expecting everybody else. All right, so second audience, you are in the majority, right? So if you look at the words that have been used to describe cost management, scary, afraid, concerned, feels more like last week's Halloween party rather than cost management, right? And if you look at the feedback that is done from multiple surveys done in the past, the one constant thing that is up there in the cloud challenges is the managing your cloud spend. It's up there with things like security, with things like resourcing on your cloud, all of those things, and cloud spend is always there. And with the things, when you see what Gartner says, that in the next 4 years, they expect cloud spend to double, or if you hear other analyst feedback on the economy which says it's possibly going to slow down, the one thing that's going to remain constant in that is that we need to have better control on our costs. Right? My name is Rafael Chaco, and I'm the Group Program Manager on the Azure Cost Management team. So just a quick, what are the key takeaways for today? The goal for us today is no matter what your role is in your organization, whether you're on the finance side, governance, DevOps, IT Ops, you should have the right tools, the visibility, accountability, and get the optimization capabilities for your cloud spend. And the rest of the way, we'll look at a lot of demos that are going to cover all of this stuff. Now, what we have today is a lot of demos to cover all these aspects. So we'll look at tools that are available to get that visibility, the accountability, and the optimization on your cloud spend. And I'm also fortunate to have today with us from Mars Incorporated, Jim Bragg. And he's going to talk to us about Mars's journey using cost management. Any partners in the house? All right. So we'll also look at cost management experiences for partners. This is going to cover cost management experiences for you as the partner, and also cost management experiences for your end customers that you can enable based on some policy. And this is available on the new Microsoft partner agreement. Since we have a lot of content to cover, I will hang around after this session to take any questions in case we don't get time to do any Q&A at the end of the session today. Okay? So with that, without much further ado, I'd like to welcome to the stage Jim Bragg. Jim is a senior cloud analyst at Mars. And Jim, thank you for joining us today. Now, I personally am very grateful to Jim for all of the feedback that he's given on cost management, both good and bad, but he keeps me honest. And one of the things that from a Microsoft perspective, I'm also very grateful for Mars for being a great customer. So to get started, Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about your cloud journey? What was your world like before cost management, and what do you do today?
Hello, Raphael. Thanks very much for inviting me here. I'm getting my steps in this conference, I can tell you. So Mars, you might know some of our brands. So I'm hoping that either you or your kids or your dog or your cat like some of these. Anyway, in response to your question, what did it used to be like? It used to be awful, boring, and time-consuming to get cost management details out of Azure. You had to download this enormous file, which sometimes bombed. It used to take ages, and then you had to import it into Excel, run pivot tables, and get whatever you needed out of it. Very long and tedious, and I could have been doing so much more value added during that process. So that was what it was. What is it now? So we're going to do a bit of a demo now, right?
Yes, we are.
Excellent.
You have to.
Oh yeah, what I used to have to do just a few months ago was create every single view and report every month.
Just give me 1 second.
Now, extreme extender. Almost there.
It's coming up there.
It is coming out there.
It doesn't want to go all the way.
It doesn't want to go all the way. It's worked last night.
Come on. Let me get through this. There you go.
Excellent.
All right. First success.
Thanks very much. So what I used to have to do is make these reports every period, but now you can actually recall a view or a report and actually look at it. So this is very time efficient. And you can make adjustments. Let's say I just want to have a look at the virtual machine. Can you click that? Yeah, of course. So if you just click on the virtual machine, then it changes the costs. And you go, oh, this is rather what I want. And you save as, you know, Jim's virtual machines or whatever. And you can save that for next time. And they've got some really cool date handling functionality as well, where you can, you know, adjust the report for the last quarter, last month, so last 7 days. It all makes it very much more time efficient for you to do value-added tasks. And then what do you need to do with this report? You want to organize it in dashboards. You want to share it in dashboards. So you pin it to your dashboard. And then you can, dashboards are really, really useful for collaborating and sharing your work with other people, because that's what it's all about. So one of these views at the top will enable us to demonstrate forecasting. Now I've got a really good real-life example. I have a pet care manager in Mexico. He asked me, he said, Jim, what's our service spend going to be for the rest of the year? I need to know, because I want to know if I'm going to come in at a budget. And so whereas before it would be a manual thing, here I can just point to the light green stuff and give him that cost. But even more cool, if I actually got his budget and actually put it in that red dotted line there, that enables me to sort of warn him, hey, towards the end of the year, your forecast says you're going to go over your budget. And then I can engage him more and say, hey, maybe you want to do some optimization. Maybe you want to right-size your machine or shut your machine down to make sure he comes under the budget that he really wants to. So this is all pretty cool stuff. Back to you, Raphael.
All right. Thanks, Jim. So how many folks here are on multiple clouds? Do you have AWS as well? So one of the things that I really want to talk a little bit about today is how you can look at your cross-cloud spend on Azure. So what we allow you to do, and I have one of those reports saved on my dashboard, so I'm just going to open it up, makes it convenient. We have a cloud connector that you can actually use. So if you have connected, which you see right here, which is my cloud connector. With that cloud connector, we allow you to bring in your AWS data into Azure, into cost management. And the nice thing is we have done the heavy lifting here to kind of normalize the schemas. So you see a new dimension here. You bring that data into your management group structure. And once you bring that, you can have your AWS spend and your Azure spend available for you in a single pane of glass. So what I'm looking at here is I've configured a connector to bring in my AWS data, and I'm looking at what my cloud spend was for AWS for that given time period. If I want to look at this data for AWS and Azure, I'm just going to remove this provider dimension that I have here, and now I'm looking at my data across both the systems, which is AWS and Azure, and then I can use all of the dimensionality that I had that was available for me on AWS. So if I want to look at this data by my location, or if I want to look at this data by service, or if I want to look at this data by availability zones, that's available for us in a single pane of glass. And the nice thing is that because it's all integrated together in this data layer, you get all the other functionality as well, which means that if you're trying to schedule some budgets, you can do that with your AWS spend, or you can do it with the AWS and Azure spend together in that single pane of glass. So this makes it very convenient if you have Azure available for you, AWS available, and you want to bring that into your cost management. The other interesting feature that we have that we'll talk a little bit about today is reservations. Any folks here that use reservations today? Okay, so one of the biggest concerns that we had with reservations, I know, Jim, you have mentioned a little bit about how you wanted to see your utilization for reservations, right? So you have Databricks and you have VMs as well for reservations, right?
Without reserved instances, you really can't get value. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Reserved instances are a really good way of getting value out of Microsoft Azure.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know what reservations are, it allows you to, if you have sufficient consumption on VMs, for example, you can actually get deep discounts for bringing in that. You can get deep discounts by signing up for a 1 year or a 3 year commitment. And once you have that discount, you can go either on a monthly plan, and that monthly plan allows you to pay on a month-to-month basis, or you can pay upfront for the whole reservations. And the nice thing with the monthly plan is there is no penalty for going on a monthly plan. It's the same price as you would have for a full year reservation purchase. But once you buy the reservation, because it is a significant amount of commitment, what you want to do is ensure that you have enough utilization, that people are using the VMs as you have predicted. Because if you don't, there is money left on the table. So I have a reservation dashboard here that we will walk through that gives you some of those views into your reservation. The first thing that I'm going to show you here is my reservation utilization view. I'm just going to go to a monthly view because this gives me a sort of longer period. So you see that for this reservation that I purchased, I can see that over time, I did not utilize my reservation in a sort of meaningful way with the right amount of utilization. I was only using 60% of my reservation, which means that I had 40% that I was money that I was leaving on the table. So this is a good way for us to get that accountability with folks. You can reach out to the right people, confirm, make sure that they have the need for that reservation, and they are utilizing it appropriately. You can see here we've taken some remediation actions, and now my reservation utilization has gone up to close to 100%, which tells me that now I'm actually getting the savings that I had planned. But what happens if you did not need that reservation, or if the folks come back and say, yes, I thought I was going to use it, but I don't think I'm using it to the full extent? You have options like exchange. And with exchange, you can exchange this with no penalty for another SKU that you are actually utilizing. Or you can do a partial exchange, or you can do a full exchange. So if I bought a D3 series, and I bought 100 units of those, and I find out I'm only using 70 of those, I can take that value for the remaining 30 and apply it to another reservation purchase for another series of machines that I need. So that gives you a lot of flexibility in how you handle your reservations. And in the actual eventuality that if you feel that I do not need this reservation at all, you always have the option to refund. There are some restrictions that apply, like a prepayment penalty and a limit on how much you can refund, but that is also an option that is available for you as a reservation, right? So with that, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about invoice reconciliation. I know that we're getting a lot of feedback about invoice reconciliation being a challenge. So what does it mean? So usually when you get a bill, there's always a question that gets asked. What is that bill? What are the drivers of that cost? What were the things that we spent on? Let's take an example of what it looked like. I'm just going to switch into a persona that is actually getting a bill and seeing a month-over-month cost. So here you see I got my bill. I got, for the month of October, my cost went up a little bit more. So I had $72,000 in September. In October, my cost went up a little bit more to $92,000. You know what's going to happen, right? Our manager is going to come to us and say, hey, Rafs, why the hell did our costs go up so much? What are things you want to do? And give me the data behind what drove those costs. The one view that I want to talk about, which is a pretty convenient view that you should have handy, is this invoice details view. So what does invoice details give you? It's a tabular view that allows you to get some more information about the data, but it doesn't just give you that information, it also gives you a quick way to do some ad hoc analysis on that data, right? So here I got my bill, I'm seeing that my month bill for September was $92,000. What are the typical questions that our managers will come and ask us? You're going to kind of come to me and say, hey, Rafs, which department, which line of business was spending this money? Earlier I had, like Jim said, I would get a pivot table and slice and dice that data. Here, I can just switch to a department view, and now I get the breakdown of my cost. I'm going to say, I think it was me that spent most of that money, boss, sorry, right? So I see this. The next question likely is, okay, that is great, but what were the services that you use? We can actually pivot that around and select service name. And now I'm looking at that data by service. So I know that I spent a lot of money on virtual machines, or for this build period, a lot of that money was spent on virtual machines, Azure Stack, HD Insight. And how many of you use tags to identify your cloud applications? So this is also a very handy feature today, that you can also look at this data by tags. So let's say, for example, I was running a migration project and I had tagged all the resources running under that migration project in a certain way. Or if I have tagged my environments in a certain way, and I want to see in this month's bill, how much did I spend on that particular tag value. It's a convenient way of using tags. There's another dimension that's available over here. So I'm going to select tags, and I want to know out of this $92,000, how much of that spend was related to my environment from dev or production, right? So I'm going to select production here. And before I get to that, we can quick plug on data hygiene. One thing with tags is going to be as good as your data hygiene. So there are a lot of features that our friends in the Azure policy team have with resource tagging policy that you can enable, which gives you those flexibility about going ahead and actually tagging the resources, applying policies so that all your resources that are deployed have the right tag data. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you have all this usage data with a bunch of untagged values, and then it becomes sort of less efficient to do all of this analysis. So coming back to this, I wanted to identify out of this month bill, how much of it was related to production costs. So I'm going to apply the tag filter for production, and I can now quickly see that I had about $12,000 worth of spend on production. And if I want to kind of drill down further, I want to again go back and say out of this $12,000, what is the breakdown by department? I can quickly do that. So in this way, we have a lot of capabilities that are available for us to go and do that tag analysis over here. So now we'll switch a little bit onto the second part of our dimension of our cost, which is the accountability of our spend, right? So I know, Jim, you have used budgets quite a lot. Can you give us an example of your logic apps that you were using where you said budget?
Yeah, budgets. So I was practicing the speech last week, and the wife said, budgets, Jim, you've got no idea about how to keep to a budget. But that's home, not work. In a work, I had a real live example. I got a DevOps team playing with logic apps. They run up a 25K bill without knowing what they're doing, because we didn't have budgets put onto that subscription. So now we do, to keep governance, because cost avoidance is key. So that's a real live example how budgets can save you a bunch of money.
Thanks, Jim. So let me talk a little bit about some enhancements that we have made on the budget side. We've talked about budgets giving you the ability to go set some target and then getting those, setting some limits and getting alerted based on those, either based on email alerts, or we also have integration with Azure Action Groups, which allows you to plug in a little bit more automation, like plugging in with webhooks or Azure functions, and, or even SMS alerts. Some of the enhancements that have been made in budgets is the set of filters or those dimensionality that we just looked at on the cost analysis side. That's now available in budgets as well. So now, if I, just like we did when we looked at our invoice detail by tag, if, for example, I have a project that's running that I have used tags to identify that application, and I want to set a budget, I can go select that tag, select the tag value, and create a budget down to that fine grain. And we can do it on any of these dimensions that are available here. So I can go all the way down to a resource or a meter and set a budget. Or if I just want to do it for the whole project itself, like a subscription or an enrollment, I can still do that without applying any filters. The other enhancement that we have made is the integration with forecasting. Jim talked a little bit about integration of forecast in cost analysis. But we also have forecast that's integrated into budgets. So when I'm creating a budget in the past, there was no meaningful data for me to identify how I'm going to create that budget. Now, with integration with forecast and the historical views, when I go to create a budget, I can see what my last month's spend was. I can see what the historical spend was in the last 7 months or 9 months, however long that resource was available. And I can also see what that forecasted spend was. So this gives me a sort of a meaningful way to go ahead and create that budget that is actually based on actual data rather than just me picking a number out of thin air. The other piece in accountability is cost allocation. I know, Jim, you're super excited about this feature with cost allocation.
I've been waiting for this for years. Previously, it was very complicated, but if you think about a business application, if you just look at the server and storage of that business application, it's not the true cost of the application. You really want to be able to get background infrastructure like backups or express route and actually allocate it to your business applications. So your senior management know the true cost of the application. So I'm really looking forward to this functionality, Raphael.
Thanks, Jim. So for those who, just a little bit more about cost allocation. So if any of you have shared costs, let's say, for example, you're running an express route or you're running an Azure data lake that runs across, that is used by multiple lines of business like departments or multiple applications. To get the true value of what the cost was, allocated spend was for those departments, what you need is the ability to actually go and allocate those costs, those shared costs, down to those target lines of business, or it could be your applications. So we have a feature in preview right now that gives you that flexibility. So let's take a quick look at how that works. So before I go and actually walk through it, let's take a look at the dashboard that we have. I'm going to just switch over here. So what I have here is I've just selected a few subscriptions over here for which I have some costs. So I'm selecting 3 subscriptions here. One of these subscriptions is going to be my source subscription. This is the subscription on which I had some costs. So here you see this project called Trade Research IT. It had about $2,700 worth of cost. This was my shared cost. And then I have 2 other subscriptions, my finance and my research. So the finance has about $29,000 worth of cost. And then my research HR subscription has about $6,000 worth of cost. What I want to be able to do is take this shared cost and based on certain business rules, apply that cost to these target subscriptions. So this is where showback comes into sort of a useful way of allocating those costs. I need to go back to the, this can only be done by the enrollment admin or the billing account admin. So I need to go back to that scope of that admin over here. So I'm going back to my enrollment. Oh, maybe not. Just let me select that. So here, I'm setting up an allocation rule. So I'm selecting my source subscription, which in our case was the IT project that we had. So I'm selected this one over here. I've selected Trade Research IT, which had some costs. And then I want to define which is the target that I want to allocate this cost to. And the target could be the source and the target. They could be a subscription, a resource group, or a tag. Now, it depends on how your Azure environment is configured. If you have configured your lines of business as subscriptions, then you would select subscriptions. If you have configured them as resource groups, then that's what you would select. Or if you want to divvy this cost up to your cloud applications, which are tags or resource groups, then whatever meets your needs, you can select that. You have the flexibility of doing that. So in this case, I've selected the target as subscriptions too, which was my finance project and my HR project. And the next thing that I want to do is go ahead and identify the rules based on which I want to divvy this cost up. So we have a few allocation rules here. We'll quickly talk about this. So here, right now, I'm saying I want to divvy this money up proportional to the total cost of the target subscriptions. So in this case, based on what the actual spend was, my finance, we saw that it had about $29,000 worth of cost, which had a bulk of the cost. So it also gets a bulk of that allocated cost, and the HR gets the remaining. So in this case, this $2,700, this is just a preview. So this is showing you how this money would be split. So it's saying that $2,100 would go to Trade Research Finance, and the remaining would go to HR. And then I have other choices as well. I can allocate this cost based on the compute that these target subscriptions had in that time period, or based on storage or networking costs. Or if I just want to divvy this money up proportionately, peanut butter it equally, I can also just say I want to distribute this money evenly, and now it has distributed this cost evenly across both these subscriptions. So once I've created this allocation rule, I can go and enable this cost allocation rule. I'm going to say enable. Now what this is doing is it has set this rule up, and when I go back to cost analysis, I'm going to go back to the dashboard and look at that same project that we selected. What this is going to do is, on the fly, it is going to take those costs, that $2,700 worth of cost, and split that across both these target subscriptions. So now you can see that the source subscription doesn't have any costs, which was the HR IT. But if I look at my two target subscriptions, finance, that cost went up from $29,000 to $31,000. And the trade research HR project cost went up from $6,000 to some $7,000. So this was a simple way. Earlier, I think, Jim, you can attribute to how complicated this was to go do it in the back end for your own business needs, right? So with this, this is in preview. If anybody's interested in joining the preview right now, you feel free to shoot us an email, and I'm happy to bring you into the private preview that we have right now. And our goal is to probably GA this sometime in the next calendar year. Now we talked a lot about tags in various contexts. Our friends in policy have enabled a new resource group tag that I think is pretty helpful. They have a new policy which allows you to take your resource group tags and propagate that down to the resource level. I know this was a very popular feature ask, so now you can actually go create a policy that allows you to take your resource groups, and any deployments that are done on those resource groups, those tags will actually go down to the resource level. And what does that mean from a cost management perspective? In cost management, when you use your tag features, that will work just the way it did for the resource level tags. So you don't have to do any additional work. You will just start seeing those tags start coming on your resources going forward, and you can use them like you do today. And there's a remediation aspect to this as well. So whatever scope the policy is enabled, you can actually go and remediate it, which means that for all those resource groups under that particular scope, whether it's a subscription or management group, those tags will actually go ahead, and from that point forward, when you enable the tag, it will start pushing the resource group tags down to the resource level. So this is a pretty useful feature as well that I think you should take advantage of. Now we'll come to the third part of our presentation, which was the various tools for optimization, right? So we've learned a lot about what we can do to get that insights into the data, how you can get that view into your data with visibility tools like cost analysis and the Power BI dashboards that we have. But there is the accountability, which gives you better control with budgets and cost allocation and how you can allocate costs. And now we're looking at what are ways to save money and what are ways to optimize our cost. And I think Jim has done a fantastic job of right-sizing in Mars. And I think he was telling me that they saved about $500K using right-sizing recommendations, right, Jim?
That's right, Raphael. So the story is, with I'm sure many of you people, you have an on-prem data center or two, and you decide to shut one down. You end up with a whole bunch of virtual machines in the cloud, and you have a look at them, and you take your recommendations, maybe from Azure Advisor, and you want to right-size them. So let's have a look. Here we go. You can't just go to your application team and say, right, we're going to resize some of your machines. They don't like that, right? What you got to do, you got to persuade them. And Azure has some great metrics. So you up here, you just basically create a dashboard per application. And you got your CPU max, your CPU average, your memory. And you do a reality check on the right size that's been recommended. And then you take this evidence to the application team and say, oh, we're going to save 20 grand if you turn this machine, resize this machine. And you use this evidence to persuade, and Mars has saved $500,000 this year annually. If we didn't do it this year, we'd pay it next year as well, by using the right sizing to save money.
That's awesome, Jim. So the one thing that in addition to what Jim talked about on the right sizing component that I want to just a little touch on is the advisor recommendations for right sizing. So our friends in the CloudFit team have made some enhancements to the right sizing recommendations. And one of the things you will notice if you go to right sizing recommendations is now you get a view into which specific VM you should right size to. In the past, you just had a list of SKUs and you had to make the decision on which VM you should pick from that, which was not super helpful. So now that guesswork has been taken off, you have you have all your recommendations available here, just like you did before with the savings and all of that good stuff. But now you also get to see which VM I should go to. So if, for example, here, I see there's a recommendation that tells me that based on the utilization metrics of this D4 VM, it is recommending that I go to a D2 VM, and I also get to see what those saving values are. So this takes the guesswork out and makes right sizing recommendations a little bit easier. The other recommendations that are available is the virtual machine reserved instance recommendations as well. So we talked about a little earlier about utilization. So we also have virtual machine recommendations. So the nice thing with this recommendation, and this has been there for a little bit, but the nice thing with this recommendation is it looks at your actual utilization for the last 30 or 60 days. And based on that actual utilization of your machines, it tells you which SKU you should buy. It tells you which location you should buy this SKU in, because that is the basis on which you buy RIs. And it tells you what quantity you should buy and also what the potential savings are. So one thing that we heard from all of you was, great Microsoft, you're telling me what to buy, but what about the data behind it? Why should I just trust the numbers that you're telling me? If you can give me some data behind it, that would be super helpful. So one thing that there is a Power BI dashboard that was just recently launched. See, I got to move this to this pretty easily this time. So one of the reports, and the connector is available, the Power BI connector is available in GA. These reports that we have, we will make that available in the near future right now in the coming months. But what you have over here is a few reports that I think are pretty handy. One is the coverage report. So this coverage report, like I mentioned earlier, tells you exactly what your usage was on those VMs for which we are making those recommendations. So when I look at this view here, it tells me what my usage was for that particular VM. It tells me how much of that usage has RI coverage. And if I tie that with the recommendations below, now I can get a more accurate representation of what recommendations were being made and on what basis those recommendations were being made. And the nice thing is I can get this other view here which tells you exactly which region will give me the maximum savings. And you can drill down a little bit further and get into more detail if you want to identify which region you want to buy this for, which family you want to buy this for, or which SKU or meter you want to buy this for. And you can look at that usage all the way down to the meter level before you make that decision on buying the quantity of RIs that you need. And we do all this hard work in terms of saving the organization money. It's always good to get a view and being able to go to our management and say how much money savings you have actually accomplished for the company. And the savings report actually allows you to do that. So you've done all the due diligence, identifying what recommendations you should buy. But what you get over here is what your on-demand cost was, what your RI cost was, and what the net savings was for your for those VMs or reservations that you purchased. But it doesn't necessarily always be, it doesn't have to be a savings, right? If you're not using your RIs optimally, it will also tell you whether you have any unused reservations and how much money you're leaving on the table for those RIs. So you can take that remediation actions that we talked about earlier, both in terms of either getting the right people to use those VMs or exchanging it for something that's more meaningful. And there are a few other views over here, like unused RIs, which gives you a view into any unused RIs that you have, which is also similar to what you have in the portal, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. And if you're doing any chargeback, then this view gives you a view into which the consumption that happened, which cost center or subscription or resource group that consumption was attributed to, so it makes your chargeback a little easier. In addition to that, we also have the AHub report. Now, Azure Hybrid AHub or Azure Hybrid Benefit Usage, what that gives you is the ability to bring your on-prem licenses to the cloud. So with that, what it allows you to do is take these licenses, when you deploy a VM, enable AHub flag, and then you don't pay the licensing fee if you have AHub licenses. So one of the challenges again on this was, once you deploy these AHub licenses, there was no view telling you how much of those AHub licenses you have consumed. This report gives you that view. So I can see here that I have these many number of licenses that I have enabled, how many cores that covers, and there's a recommendation aspect too, that if you're not using the AHub optimally, then it gives you a view into which AHub licenses have been applied and on which VMs they have been applied. And if I see a VM that is a high-end VM with more number of cores where this AHub license has not been applied, then you get to make those remediation actions by looking at it in this view here. And if you want to get in more detail, that's also available down over here. And we talked a little bit about the the RI licenses. I just want to quickly go back into the portal and show you the RI views that are available over here as well. Yep. Is it? Review. So when I go into cost analysis, one of the views that we have is the actual view, which shows you how much you were going to be billed for. But there's also another view over here which gives you that view into amortization, right? So when I'm looking at this view here, I get to see what my actual cost was. And this, in most cases, would represent what you were getting billed. But if you have reservations, then the amortized cost tells you exactly what the discounted value of that usage was. So what is the big difference between actual and amortized? In the actual view, if I bought an RI, then my cost would be $0 because I have prepaid for that RI. But if you want to identify or you want to analyze what the actual consumption was for that RI, then you can actually switch to the amortized view. And in the amortized view, it shows you what the cost was, the amortized cost was for the RI. And it also gives you a couple of other views that we quickly take a look at. One of the views is your unused RIs. So when you come in here, there is a charge type field. This charge type allows you to see how much consumption you had, but it also allows you to see what unused RIs you had over here. So you can make the right decision. So if you see here that you have a bunch of RIs that are unused, you can again take those remediation actions. And you can also call these with the APIs. So whether you're looking at the actual cost or the amortized cost, they're both available through APIs, through the Power BI dashboard, or through the portal itself. So there are multiple ways, depending on whichever is most convenient for you. You have multiple ways of getting to this data in cost management. So we'll talk a little bit about some other recommendations as well. Just want to quickly touch. If you go to the reservations blade, there are reservations available for other advisor recommendations that are available for things like express route. So if you have any non-provisioned express route reservations, that's available. Or if you have any unused public IP addresses, those which are not using any Azure resources, those are also available for you. And as various teams add additional optimization recommendations, they start showing up under cost recommendations in Advisor. So that's a convenient way to go through and look at all of your cost-saving opportunities that you have in the Azure portal itself. So with that, I'm just going to quickly jump back into the deck. See that there. See that?
Black.
It is that one.
Number 7.
There we go. So we talked a little bit about partner experiences. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what are cost management experiences available for partners. And what we'll take a look at is what you can see as a partner at different scopes, which is your partner experiences at a billing account or a billing profile, as well as what are the experiences that are available for you as the end customer. So let's quickly take a look at what those experiences look like. So what I'm logging in here is as a partner. When I come in as a partner, what I get to see is what my costs are, all up costs are. So here I'm seeing that for my current month, I had certain amount of costs. I'm looking at my previous month costs. I can see what the spend was. Just like we did it with all of the other experiences, we get to see what those costs are. There are different profiles. If I'm a partner that is in multiple currencies, you also get to see the breakdown by currencies. So there are billing profiles. I have billing profiles set up for my Europe or for my Great Britain pounds. I want to see what my costs were for one of my customers or my customers that are on the GBP currency invoice. So I can actually go and switch into that view and take a look at those experiences over here. If I want to see the breakdown by customer, there's a new dimension that shows up over here, which is the customer that are applicable for this particular profile. And I can see the breakdown by customer over here as well. So I see that I have, for this month of November, $37 of cost. If I switch to the previous month, which is October, I can say that these are my customers. I have Contoso. I have these other two customers. If I want to analyze Contoso a little bit further, I can do the same things that we did in the past. I can drill into Contoso and see a little bit more details about Contoso itself. I can see the breakdown by service or other dimensions like location, resource group, etc. But what about if Contoso comes in and says they want to get cost management experiences as well? So that is also something that we can actually enable. And what I'm going to do is switch accounts a little bit. I'm going to log in as Grace. Now, Grace is a customer at Contoso, and she wants to get cost management experiences. And if she wants to get cost management experiences, the first thing you as a partner would need to do is enable a policy for Grace, right? So I'm going to go back to my billing account, select the list of customers that I have, and in here, I can go to Contoso, and under policies, I can enable a policy over here, which allows Grace now to see cost management experiences. And once this policy is enabled, if I log in as Grace with her account and go to cost management, what she gets to see is cost management experiences at pay-as-you-go prices. So the difference was in the partner experiences, you saw the partner pricing, but in the customer experiences, you see the cost at pay-as-you-go prices. So now if I look at Grace, I can see that she's seeing her charges for the current month, which in Great Britain pounds is at the pay-as-you-go prices. And the nice thing is she gets all of the experiences that she had just like any other offer has, which is you can go set a budget, you can go use all of the dimensionalities, and down the road with features like you can export all of this data, etc. So all of these features are available for partners as well in cost management. And this feature is available now, generally available right now. And for CSP experiences, we should have that coming in the near future, in the early part of the next calendar year. So with that, let's go back a little bit and talk about what are some of the upcoming features in the roadmap itself. All the green items are already available, but what we have coming up is some features in terms of CSP new offers that we're going to light up. And those could be CSP offers, as well as experiences like sponsorship, and then support for additional clouds. So we have support for AWS that we just looked at. We expect to GA that in the early part of next quarter, in the coming quarter of 2020, as well as start some work on onboarding GCP as well. The chargebacks and cost allocation features that you looked at, that will have some additional enhancements with support for markups. So markups allows you to add a markup so your end customers can actually see the marked up value, as well as bringing in some custom charges. We also have richer hierarchies that we will support. which will allow you to bring in your own custom hierarchy, because we think it's meaningful for you to see your data in your own custom hierarchy. And the other things that we will do in the coming calendar year is deprecation of Cloudin. So we still kind of straddling cost management and Cloudin. As soon as we bring in the CSP experiences, we will be looking to deprecate Cloudin. And some other richer reporting capabilities that we will be adding is things like instance reporting. That is a popular ask. The fully loaded cost of a VM is something that we will add, and instance reporting is something else that we will be adding. All right, so with that, Jim, any final thoughts before we kind of just recap some of these things?
Well, I think it's very important for people to realize Raphael's covered a lot today. So whether you've got reserved instances or right sizing or hybrid benefit or budgets, these are all tools for you to use to keep your costs down, and you've got to use all of them.
Thanks, Jim. So just to reiterate, right, we have a lot of tools available that we covered in terms of visibility, accountability, but there are also everything that you looked at today is available using exports or APIs if you want that programmatic access. And no matter what your role is, like we said, whether you are a finance person, governance person, you have cost management that is available for you, right? So with that, here are some helpful links that will give you a view into what you can take a look at, and we also have a Twitter account. Please follow us over there. And I thank you again, everybody, for joining us here today, and appreciate you taking the time. Have the wonderful rest of Ignite, and goodbye.